for the Georgia Rural Investment Fund and today's lunch sponsor, Miss Mandy Boehringer.
Well, hello. Good afternoon. My name is Mandy Boehringer, and I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. Let us have another round of applause, please, for our last panel. Amy, Dave, Larry, what a terrific insight from those leaders. You know, the Georgia Rural Investment Fund is proud to sponsor today's event, and we're so excited to be here to learn about the efforts being done in rural Georgia. You know, I have to say, like Amy, I've had the opportunity to visit the majority of the rural communities throughout the state, and I am willing to bet the entire Georgia Rural Investment Fund, please do not tell my boss that, but I am willing to bet the entire fund that if we focus on all the great things, we will have more great things to focus on. So with that being said, I hope that we share positive stories of celebration over our lunch, and we're excited that Chick-fil-A is our sponsor today, and if everyone would, please feel free to step out into the hallway and grab lunch. So thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Adam Smith, who serves as the 2020 Vice Chairman of the Rural Prosperity Council and is the Senior Vice President for Commercial Food and Agribusiness Relationship Manager with Truist.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being with us today, both here in Tifton and those of you who are joining us virtually. We will keep the program moving and bring on our friend Seth Milliken, who serves as the Executive Director of the Georgia Transportation Alliance. Seth is one of our state's experts on all aspects of transportation and brings tremendous influence and expertise in his work with the Alliance. Please continue to enjoy your lunch while we hear from Seth. Thanks.
Hey guys, Seth Milliken here with the Georgia Transportation Alliance. It's great to be with you guys today talking about a subject that's near and dear to my heart. We obviously are a little bit biased, but at the Georgia Transportation Alliance, we really see transportation investment as a key component of Georgia's economic mobility and economic success as a state. So the Georgia Transportation Alliance is a coalition of companies under the umbrella of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and we work on policy and advocacy programs related to transportation issues in Georgia, and I'm excited to be able to talk to you today kind of about an issue that's really of significant focus for us right now, and it has shown itself to be even more important considering what we've been through in the state of Georgia over the last 6 months or so. So glad to be with you today. We're going to talk through a little bit of Georgia's history in the transportation area, talk a little bit about where Georgia is today and the relevance of the freight and logistics industry to our state, and then also look out at the future and talk a little bit about what Georgia's future looks like. All right, this is just a short representation of what Georgia's history looks like from a transportation perspective. Back in 1916, the Georgia Highway Department was established, and that later became the Georgia Department of Transportation. If you're looking for an anecdotal example of how transportation investment and economic development are related, it doesn't take long to find two of Georgia's top corporate citizens in Delta Airlines and UPS, both of whom have located their corporate headquarters in Georgia. And if you look in the mid-1900s, there are a lot of developments that took place between the opening of the Interstate 285, the growth of the Savannah port, that really began to cement Georgia's position as a national leader in transportation around the country. We've seen remarkable progress over the last 10 or 12 years under the leadership that we've had down at the state capitol. Looking at the passage of the Transportation Investment Act about 10 years ago, GDOT moving forward with some tremendous projects around the metro Atlanta area, the passage of House Bill 170 in 2015, and then passage of transit governance legislation in 2016 and 2018. So Georgia's history economically is very strongly built on transportation investment, and we've seen that really increase in Georgia over the last 10 years or so. Next couple of slides, we're going to talk through some of Georgia's transportation assets. And I'm not going to hit all of these, but this is just a great representation to show how important our physical transportation assets are to Georgia. As we have almost 7,200 miles of interstate highway around the country. We have almost 130,000 public road miles. This other statistic right here I want to focus on, and we're going to come back to this. Georgia moves about 6 million tons of freight across our road and bridge network every week. And again, we're going to come back to that. That's a very important statistic for our conversation as we look at Georgia's future in transportation. The freight and logistics industry is a big industry for our state. Georgia has over 4,600 miles of freight rail track around the state. That is built of 2 Class 1 railroads, both of which are on dock at the Savannah port. And we also have 26 short line railroads that serve as last mile connectors to our communities around the state. Everybody knows Georgia's home to the world's busiest airport, the airport that has been Georgia's busiest airport for a number of years. What a lot of folks don't realize is that Hartsfield is one of 107 publicly owned airports across the state of Georgia, and all of our regional airports play a key role in our economic success as a state, and they obviously support a tremendous number of jobs as well as over $2 billion in economic activity around the state each year. So just a quick list of some quick facts to recap what we just talked about and begin to transition into this focus on freight and logistics and why that's so important for the state of Georgia right now. Savannah is the largest container port on the East Coast. It's also the fastest growing port in the entire country. The Port of Savannah is the 4th busiest U.S. container port in the entire United States, and then the Port of Brunswick is the number 2 U.S. port for imports and exports of vehicles. Again, if you're looking for anecdotal stories to talk about how important transportation is to economic development, this statistic right here is a great one to point to. One of the reasons that the Port of Brunswick has become the number 2 U.S. port for total vehicle imports and exports is the construction of the Kia automobile plant over in West Point, Georgia. That's a huge boost to the Port of Brunswick and has been so since that was constructed. Everybody knows that Atlanta is one of the worst cities in the United States for traffic. If you live in Atlanta, you're going to spend over 70 hours a year stuck in traffic. Everyone knows that Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, again, is and has been one of the world's busiest airports for many, many years. But this last bullet point right here I want to focus in on. We noted earlier that the Savannah port is one of the fastest growing ports in the country. And their projections suggest that they will double in capacity over the next 8 years. So between today and the year 2028, they'll go from processing about 4.5 million containers a year to almost 9 million containers a year. And again, 6 million tons of freight across our road and bridge network every week, doubling our traffic down at the Port of Savannah. All of this means tremendous economic opportunities for the state of Georgia as we look at our freight and logistics future. One of the words that most accurately describes Georgia right now is growth. We're currently undergoing the 2020 census, and most projections suggest that Georgia is going to become the 7th or 8th most populated state in the entire United States, and then by the next census that we will move into the top 5 in terms of state size across the United States. The challenge with that is that growth is not distributed equitably across the state. So even as we see the state grow as a whole, we also see that there are going to be communities around the state that will actually stay static or lose population over the next 10 or 15 years. And that's obviously a challenge for us to be thinking about, both as we think about economic development, but as we think about the role that freight and logistics plays in that economic development picture. We also know that economic factors are tied to population factors, and so as we see that population inequitably distributed across the state of Georgia, we also see that that's going to affect local economies all across the state of Georgia. And we're going to see some counties that will become more economically distressed as that population change takes place. So as we move forward, we're going to look at a couple of slides that we actually borrowed from the Georgia Department of Transportation. Commissioner Russell McMurray gave a presentation last fall to a group of legislators that had some great information, and he was kind enough to share that with us so that we could share that with you. This is a visualization of the top 18 U.S. goods distribution markets across the United States. No surprise, Atlanta and Georgia is right in the middle of that conversation. This is also a great representation of what that freight traffic looks like coming in from other states, coming in from our port, going to Atlanta, and then being distributed across the rest of the country. Now, most of that truck traffic serves local markets here in Georgia or markets in the Southeast. However, the interesting and possibly concerning factor about all of this is that of all of the containers that come into the Port of Savannah, over 80% are going to go on a truck. So the national average for that modal share for trucks is about 70%, and Georgia is almost 15% higher. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth coming in through the port. We're seeing a tremendous amount of population growth. Most of that growth in commercial traffic is going on a truck. And for those of us that have tried to drive through Atlanta anytime recently, we know the challenge is going to be capacity for that growth in truck traffic across the United States. So just to summarize, Georgia has a great history in transportation, has a great history with developing and building freight and logistics networks. And because of that leadership, we have an excellent set of assets that are here in the state of Georgia. We have 15 interstate highways. Metro Atlanta is the second largest inland port in the country, only behind Chicago. We have the world's busiest airport. We've got a fantastic southeast rail hub between our Class 1s and short line railroads, and we have a strong start to our network of inland ports around the state as well. And again, to recap, we have the largest and fastest growing U.S. container port, the fourth busiest container port in the entire United States that is handling significant import and export tonnage on an annual basis. Going back to the point about modal share with those containers that are coming in at the port and coming into our state, a significant portion of those containers are not going to stay here. Somewhere between 30 and 50% of the containers that come into the Port of Savannah are going to a final destination somewhere outside the state of Georgia. This is, again, another slide and graphic that we borrowed from the Georgia Department of Transportation that shows by interstate corridor how much or what percentage of that traffic is going to a destination that is outside the state of Georgia. So, for example, if you live on the I-75 corridor, about 1/4, 22% of that traffic is going somewhere outside the state of Georgia. If you live on the I-20 corridor, about 28% of that traffic is going somewhere outside the state of Georgia. And that's very important for our policymakers to know and to consider as they think about what the future of freight and logistics looks like in the state of Georgia. Again, another graphic that we borrowed from the Georgia Department of Transportation that really shows how important Georgia's position is, not just in the Southeast, but to the Midwest and to the Northeast as well, for the distribution of that freight traffic as it comes through the state of Georgia and then distributes out across the rest of the United States. Obviously, things are a little bit different now than they were 6 months ago. And one of the things that we've been actively engaged in, both at the Chamber and the Georgia Transportation Alliance, is beginning to quantify and construct some data trends on what transportation and infrastructure looks like in a post-COVID economy. It's still early. We have good data. We don't have a lot of trends, but here are some of the things that we do know. Based on information that we got from the State Road and Tollway Authority, Georgia's toll revenues are down about 30%. Governor Brian Kemp and our leaders at the state capitol did a fantastic job this year grappling with how to address the needed cuts in the state budget as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and the quarantine that took place back in the spring and the summer. GDOT was not immune to that austerity, and so their share of budget cuts for the 2021 budget was about $300 million. That's as a result of lost motor fuel revenue and a variety of other factors. In Metro Atlanta, we know that MARTA ridership is down about 70% on rail and about 50% on bus. And again, that's a snapshot of the effects that the pandemic has had on our state's economy. We talked about Hartsfield-Jackson being the world's busiest airport. We still believe that to be the case, but airport traffic at Hartsfield-Jackson at its peak was down almost 95%. It's a really staggering statistic if you think about that. The Dow Jones Transportation Index dropped almost 20% in March of this year during the height of the coronavirus pandemic. Here in Georgia, that was the largest month-over-month drop in the transportation index since they started tracking it back in the early 1980s. At its peak, we know that truck volumes were down about 10 or 15% in Georgia. The good news is, and we've been in communication with GDOT and some of our other partner agencies around the state, these numbers have absolutely begun to turn around, and we do think that traffic throughout the state of Georgia is back to almost pre-pandemic levels, and that's a good sign, not just for transportation infrastructure investment, but it's a good sign for our state's economy because that means folks are being able to go back to work. So just to summarize some of these things that we've talked about today, we know that port traffic is dramatically increasing over the next several years, over the next 8 or 10 years. We know that airport traffic is projected to greatly increase by a percentage at the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. We talked about Georgia as one of the fastest growing states in the country. As people move to Georgia, they're bringing cars. We're expecting to see another 1.5 million cars on our road between 2015 and 2030. Again, we talked about modal share with that traffic coming into the port. Significant portion of that traffic is going to go on a truck. Now, our transit number here says need number, and that's an area where there's not as much data out there, and we're constantly engaged in gathering more data. So we're continuing to look at that picture and those public transportation systems across the state of Georgia, and we'll continue to work on what that projection looks like. So looking into the future, let's transition maybe a little bit from talking about where we are currently in Georgia to what the future looks like. And we know that because of population growth, because of that growth at the port, because of the accompanying economic development that goes along with that, one of the things that we need to be thinking about is how do we responsibly and strategically invest in freight and logistics assets across the state of Georgia so that we can handle that population growth and really turn that into an economic advantage. Commissioner Russell McMurray spoke to the Georgia Commission on Freight and Logistics last November, and I'm not going to go through all of these numbers, but the top line projections from GDOT indicate that we're going to need another roughly $2.5 billion a year to invest just in freight and logistics system assets in order to be competitive and be able to handle that growth that we've talked about coming to the state of Georgia. The challenge is I don't think anybody has an extra $2.5 billion a year lying around. And so the challenge for our policymakers moving forward is to be able to look at these factors, consider what the future looks like, and then make some decisions about how we strategically invest in those assets and prepare for that growth. One of the things that we do here at the Chamber and we do at the Georgia Transportation Alliance is we like to talk to voters and do polling on an annual basis and ask some of the same questions so we can track trends and see what public opinion is doing and what folks think about the transportation issue. So 49% of the folks that we talked to this year think that state government has primary responsibility for funding and maintaining our transportation infrastructure. There's no surprise there. Folks in Georgia are pretty smart. I think they understand that the cavalry's not going to come riding in from Washington or somewhere else, that we need to take responsibility for our own transportation future. Also, no surprise, 90% of the folks that we talk to believe that transportation is important for economic development and job growth. This is one of my favorites because we talk with elected officials a lot across the state of Georgia, and we also like to find out what do people think about how elected leaders respond to these challenges. 51% of the voters that we talk to are more likely to re-elect an elected official, a politician, a political leader who votes to increase transportation funding. Again, folks in Georgia are smart. They've seen the benefits that have come to our state as a result of this leadership and this growth that we've talked about over the last 10 or 15 years, and they see that as a net good for our state. So what does the future look like? I mentioned political leadership. We've seen a lot of political leadership and a lot of great progress on transportation issues over the last 10 or 15 years. I'm glad to report from our interactions with our elected officials at the Chamber and at GTA, it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. We were able to partner with the Georgia Legislature, House Transportation Chairman Kevin Tanner and Senate Transportation Chairman Brandon Beach back in 2019 to establish the Georgia Commission on Freight and Logistics. So the Freight and Logistics Commission is a group, and you can see the list here on the screen, is a group of elected leaders, business leaders, local elected officials who are convened by the legislature to look at these very issues that we've been talking about today, to look at the future of Georgia's freight and logistics network and begin to form some recommendations for how we address that growth into the future. The commission met 4 times over the course of 2019 all across the state of Georgia, in Savannah, Waycross, and Atlanta. And at the end of that process, they issued a report back to the General Assembly, and the first recommendation on their report was, we need more time. This is a huge challenge. There's a lot of data to look at. There's a lot of things to consider as we look at solutions. We need another year to look at this. So I'm glad to report to you that during the conclusion of the 2020 legislative session back in June, the legislature reauthorized the Georgia Commission on Freight and Logistics for a second year of work. They have already had their first meeting a couple of weeks ago up in Atlanta, and then they will meet another 3 or 4 times between now and the end of the year. And so they're going to be looking at a couple of key questions. I think having gotten their arms around it, having quantified what our freight and logistics future looks like, I think they're asking 3 questions. What projects or what types of projects do we need to be building to address these challenges? How much do those projects or those types of projects cost? And then the big question is, how do we pay for those? And so the Georgia Transportation Alliance and the Georgia Chamber, we will continue to work alongside the commission to support them from a policy and logistics perspective and continue to advocate for Georgia's business leaders and our local chambers all across the state of Georgia as they come up with what those solutions are for Georgia's freight and logistics future. So with that, it's great to be with y'all today. It's great to be able to talk a little bit about what Georgia's future looks like, to talk a little bit about where we are in a post-pandemic environment as it relates to freight and logistics, and really reiterate the message that Georgia's transportation system is strong. We've seen great political leadership over the last several years in this area. I anticipate that we'll continue to see good, strong political leadership into the future. And so from our perspective, Georgia's freight and logistics future is very bright. As we continue that work, the Georgia Transportation Alliance has kicked off a campaign, the Georgia Can't Wait for Freight campaign. We're using that to advocate for and educate local business communities about these issues that we've talked about today, but also what's going on with transportation in their communities. And so I'd encourage you to go to our website at can'twaitforfreight.com. Go follow our Facebook page, check us out on Twitter, and we'll be posting more updates there as we go through this process. But again, really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and talk through these issues, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Seth. And yes, there's much opportunity developing thanks to our incredible port system, and we're fortunate to have the infrastructure that we do thanks to our Department of Transportation and our rail network, but there's much more that needs to be done to fully leverage this opportunity. We appreciate it, Seth, your insight today. And if you're interested in learning more about your community specifically, I would highly recommend you connect with Seth in the Georgia Transportation Alliance. I can speak to that personally. Last year in Dougherty County, where I live, we were advocating for our county T-Splost, and Seth and GTA were instrumental in our community helping pass that and provided a lot of resources and insight to that. So always appreciate Seth in the Georgia Transportation Alliance. So far, we have discussed the future of rural America, leadership, healthcare, heard insightful data about our community's futures, and gave perspective on the upcoming legislative session. Now, let us turn our attention to our most precious resource and the future of all of our communities, our children and their education. Please join me in welcoming 3 distinguished educators who will share their efforts to provide top quality experience to our rural students and to their parents despite today's COVID-19 reality. Please welcome Dr. Kermit Gilliard, who serves as a superintendent of Grady County School System, Superintendent of the Baldwin County School System, Dr. Norris Price, and Dr. Brown Reagan Martin, who serves as the superintendent of the Early County School System. Joining our panelists will be Dr. Robert Gaines, who serves as Director of Communications for the Georgia Partnership of Excellence in Education. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you, Matt, for the introduction, and thank you for the Georgia Chamber for having this conversation. I'd like to take a point of privilege to say that our panel today I consider a rock star panel. For those who are plugged into the education sector, you know that in rural Georgia, Dr. Gilliard, Dr. Reagan Martin, and Dr. Price are among the stars doing that work. So it's an honor to be able to moderate this conversation this morning, or this afternoon, excuse me. Before we jump into the questions, I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to just give us an overview of what you're dealing with right now in your own communities. And Dr. Reagan Martin, how about you?
We're the same. We didn't start until after Labor Day, and we started with the hybrid model along with the virtual model. So half of our kids come Monday, Tuesday, and the other half come Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday is a virtual day. And what we're working to do is transition to more of our kids coming 4 days instead of 2 days. There's a demand from both parents and teachers for kids to come back. Kids also actually are asking to come back. They want more exposure to their teachers and more hands-on learning. So we are working, like Dr. Price said, to pivot and to bring more of our kids back. And it's been a challenge with our teachers learning Google Classroom, Edpuzzle, Kami, all these different technology tools. So they've been learning a lot also. So large learning curve for everybody.
Dr. Gilliard?
Well, similarly to Dr. Reagan Martin and Dr. Price, we were doing exactly the same thing. I told our faculty and staff this year that there were 2 words that we had to learn and we had to practice daily, and that was flexibility and patience. And our patients get stride daily. We did something a little different than most schools. We had anticipated that at some point this school year we would have to close, shut down. The past 2 years we've had tornadoes, hurricanes, weather events, and have missed 10 days or more the previous 2 years. So we started looking at what could we do so that all of our teachers would be prepared in case we had to close the doors because of COVID. And so our school day is from 8 to 2:30. Our buses start running at 2 o'clock, and then all of our teachers are doing working with our 1,300 virtual students from 2:30 to 3:30. That way we didn't have a group of teachers that were doing virtual, in part doing face-to-face. And so far we don't anticipate having to close, but if that has to happen, then all of our teachers are prepared to go virtual and know all of the software and things that we're using. But like Dr. Reagan Martin and Dr. Price, we're anticipating quite a number of our kids coming back at the end of the grading period.
So it sounds like you all have a lot going on, to say the least. Dr. Gilliard, let's stay with you for a moment. So when you think about the short-term challenges you're facing and everything you're doing to tackle those, but then you think beyond to long-term implications, what are some of the things that you think about with respect to the decisions you're making today, whether it be teacher training, any type of partnerships you're trying to establish with local businesses? Because at some point, there are some long-term things that have to be considered, and how are you all tackling that?
In looking at that, I see the future of education changing. I think there'll always be a virtual component, and one of the things that's been really exciting is seeing our teachers, while they're struggling, and if you talk to them today, they'll tell you they're drowning, they're doing a phenomenal job teaching our students, and especially our younger teachers who are so interested in technology. All of that's new to me, and I struggle with it, but they've taken off with it. And I think long term, we're going to see, I think there'll always be a virtual component in education, and had not anticipated that prior to this adventure.
It's interesting, Dr. Reagan-Martin. What do you think?
I agree with Dr. Gilliard. I think it's one of those things, now that we've done it, we can't turn back. It's always going to be there. It's going to be one of those things where, say next year, things are back to normal as they can be. Students are going to say, well, I want that virtual option. And parents are going to say, I want that virtual option. So it's going to be one of those things that we're going to have to continue to offer. I will also say, along with Dr. Gilliard, that teacher training is critical. We were a Google Classroom project school before COVID came, but only a small number of our teachers were participating, so they were trained in Google Classroom and different technology tools. Now all of our teachers have that training. So same as Dr. Gilliard, all of our teachers have face-to-face kids, and they also have virtual kids. That way, if we were to shut down, all of our teachers would be prepared for that. And that's one of those things that's just going to continue. There will be more and more for those teachers to learn. As technology changes, which is just exponential, how things change, there will always be more to learn. Kids are going to be more savvy as they come through K-12, and the workforce demands are always there. So workforce has to be ready, our kids need to be ready, and our teachers need to be ready. So definitely all in the future.
Dr. Reagan-Martin, what are your thoughts about other ways that we will or could do education differently moving forward?
Robert, I think we're going to have to think outside the box. I think we're going to have to look at how to be innovative, how to continuously improve what we're doing. It may be that we work regionally with institutions. It may be that we have online components that are different from what we have now. I think it's going to be one of those things that this is the opportunity to step back and say, okay, we've had traditional school all these years, but what can it look like? So even though we still have traditional classrooms and we have this virtual component, I think now is the time to look and see if there's something that we can do differently. And I think a lot of us are doing that. We're dipping our toe into this whole virtual component and trying to figure out how we can connect with our kids, even if they're not face-to-face, because that's the competition. So we have to realize, people have choices now, and we want to be the best choice, and we need to figure out what that's going to look like. It may not be what we're doing today. It may be something different tomorrow, but now's the time to be innovative.
Dr. Gilliard, what do you think?
Continuing along those same lines, I'm excited about the young people that we have the opportunity to get back into education. So many of our young folks have not recently gone on to school to be teachers. They've gone on to be engineers and big things. And I want those folks back in education. And I think that if they see that they have the freedom to do some things in education where you're not in a straight row in desk, that we have the opportunity to get some of those great minds back in the classroom teaching.
That would be a pretty awesome outcome, see the uptick in teacher enrollment or preparation. So Dr. Price, you mentioned assessments, and we're talking about doing education differently. What opportunities do you see in light of the challenges you're facing now to rethink how we approach education?
So making sure that we close that digital divide, so that everyone truly has a choice, not those that have access to a computer and access to broadband. So if we want all of our students to have the choice, how are we going to make that happen? And so we've been very intentional in our school district of providing a device to every child and also making sure that they have access to broadband. We've installed Wi-Fi antennas outside of our buildings. We've purchased hotspots in order to make that accessibility happen. And then we also have mobile hotspots that we can put on buses so that that digital divide that existed in the spring doesn't exist today in our community. So the use of technology, I think, is going to be something that is going to stay with us, and teachers are going to have to embrace it. They were reluctant at first, but I think with appropriate training, I think you can use technology to truly change the way we deliver education, K-12.
I totally agree. And one of the things that came to mind is that this year we also saw some major budget cuts. So there's an increasing need for technology. There's a decrease in some of the revenue you're normally getting to operate as a school district. Dr. Gilliard, I'm curious to know, what opportunities do you see to partner with business leaders, municipal leaders, legislators to ensure that this work actually gets done? Because it's coming. I think you all see that it's coming, but there's also going to be a need for resources to ensure you can meet the need.
The big need in our community is broadband. We've, like Dr. Price, we've bought hotspots. We've got the bus Wi-Fi. We have access in our parking lots at school. But I just can't imagine, and I use this example all the time with my 16-year-old, I can't imagine sitting in the car with my 16-year-old in the parking lot of Carroll High School for him to do his lessons. That's just not going to happen with my 16-year-old. He may sit by himself, but the two of us together aren't going to make it. And so it's very important that I think that we partner with the businesses and we get some business to extend broadband throughout our communities, especially in rural Georgia. And I know that I hear from our friends in Metro Atlanta, and there's still areas there that may not have broadband. But that's the issue we struggle with. We took our CARES Act money this year and bought iPads and Chromebooks so that all of our students would have one. So we've got that piece taken care of, but we fear down the road in 3 to 5 years when these devices are no longer usable, how do we replace those devices? So we're already, while we're grateful that we have them and are able to use them now, already thinking down the road, how are we going to replace them? But I think that there's a business opportunity. I don't know that you'll get rich, but I think there's an opportunity for somebody to offer broadband statewide.
I know that's a big challenge in rural Georgia. Dr. Reagan Martin, what opportunities do you see for other sectors to play a role in the K-12 context?
Well, Robert, what I would like to see is a regional approach. We are in the corner of Southwest Georgia, so we're right next to Alabama and not too far from Florida. And we're going through the process of working to become a college and career academy. And so we're having to look at Dothan, Alabama, as our largest area in our area, so we're right across the river. And so we're having to look at that and trying to plug into business opportunities over there and hoping that those businesses will see the talent that we have in Early County and invest in us. So just having that regional approach, along with definitely the need for broadband. We have the hotspots and the Wi-Fi on buses and Wi-Fi in our parking lots. But there's just a huge need. And of course, we're going to get into talking about equity, because that's an equity issue, and that need for all students to have that access. But really, I'm thinking a regional approach so that we get as much help as possible.
I think a regional approach is smart for a lot of reasons. Dr. Price, I know that you are in a community where there are several higher education institutions. So what's your perspective on what role other leaders in different sectors can play in the K-12 space?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I was just thinking that one of the challenges that we faced during the pandemic in the spring and then even now is access to quality health care. And so we partnered with Georgia College, Community Healthcare Systems Incorporated, Communities in Schools, and the Baldwin County School District, not only to open a school-based health clinic, but also to provide telemedicine. So we are installing equipment in all of our schools' clinic, and now our students will be able to be seen by a specialist in Atlanta, if that's what they need, from the comfort of our own schools. All we need is the parent permission. and it's on a sliding scale. So if you can't afford it, you still can have access to quality health care. So that's an example of the business community, in this case, community healthcare systems, higher ed, a civic organization, and the school district coming together and taking a challenge that we saw in a need in our community and partnering to bring healthcare, quality healthcare to our students. And another example is the fact that we have a college and career academy. And so we want our students to be first in line for those jobs that haven't even been created. And so we have partnered with our business community to identify what those workforce needs are, and then what do we need to do as a school district to then train our students so that they can be first in line for those jobs that are being created. Great opportunities to partner with the business community in Baldwin County.
Thank you for that, Dr. Price. What I'm hearing, healthcare, broadband, we're talking about some infrastructural challenges that rural Georgia's facing. We heard about transportation not too long ago. And it brings up the word equity. And Dr. Reagan-Martin, you mentioned this. How are you all maintaining a focus on equity when the day-to-day is so much that it could easily fall on the periphery? It's important. I think we'd all agree, it's important that we focus on equity. How are you actually focusing on it in the work?
Well, definitely, Robert, trying to do as much as we can to make sure that our students have devices and internet. So that's huge, because those kids who are at home, they can't do their work without it. I mean, we do have the paper packets. We are doing that if they don't have a device or if they don't have internet, but it's really an equity issue if they don't. So we're trying as much as possible to get devices in the hands of those kids. We're not one-to-one yet, but we're working towards that, and also increasing the internet access. Another thing that we're doing is with focus on social justice and racial equity. We're partnering with the Schlechte Center to do a training for our administrators to really look at the history of our minority students. We're 70% African American, and really trying to have the broad mindset of understanding their experience and trying to just understand what they need. It may be different from our needs if we don't look like them, but trying to make sure that we are looking at their needs and understanding their history and their experiences. So to me, that's huge. And then also looking at accountability. And if you look at, and I know there's a debate about accountability right now, whether we're going to do the standardized tests, whether we're not, how much they're going to count, and that's also an equity issue. So if you look at our districts of poverty and how we're going to perform on the test, I mean, we can go ahead and tell you who's going to perform well on an exam and who's not if it's a standardized test, and I can give you the whole background behind that. I won't do that. But that's an equity issue also. Early County is involved with an initiative called True Accountability, and we're trying to show that our kids are more than test scores, and we want to be held more accountable, not less, looking at everything we do, not just testing.
Absolutely. Dr. Gilliard.
We're doing the same as Dr. Reagan-Martin. We're involved in both of those projects as well, and I would agree. We strive daily to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our learners. And when the majority of your district, well, we all eat free lunch. We have that grant so that all of our kids eat free lunch. I like to think that I'm focused on the lowest of our children, but I'm reminded frequently from parents when I get a phone call that I've overlooked someone. And so I encourage our parents to make contact with the schools, with the principal, with me, and let us know what their needs are. On the way up today, I had a conversation with a child that's become homeless, and the coaches are helping him get his clothes washed in the gym, and a state agency, because our coaches have taken that on, have decided to close the case. And so on my ride up today, I'm calling that agency saying, you can't step away because our coaches are helping. That's your role, not our role. We just have some concern coaches. But that's happening in all of our systems. We have students that are struggling, and I think the public, the general public, has no idea what our teachers are dealing with on a daily basis. And so when we get to the equity piece, my 16-year-old doesn't have to worry about clean clothes because his mom or I take care of him, mostly his mom. But I have kids at school that are concerned about clean clothes, and they don't come to school because they don't have clean clothes.
Yeah, I mean.
And we have a pandemic.
Right. Life is happening, and there's a pandemic. Dr. Price, you mentioned devices as one of the ways you're trying to level the playing field for all your students. What other challenges are you trying to overcome as it relates to equity?
Like Dr. Gillier, definitely closing that digital divide and truly making sure that we are providing devices to all our kids and for them to have access. I talked about the providing quality health care, feeding our kids. I mean, that's been huge, and making sure that even during the pandemic, we are getting food out to our kids that are learning remotely. And so we've been able to do that, and we've been able to provide not meals for 5 days a week, we're providing meals for 7 days a week. So they get meals for the weekend as well, because we know that we have to meet the social emotional needs of our kids. Kids don't learn if they're hungry. So making sure that we're feeding them, washing their clothes. Believe it or not, we have a laundry center, and Dr. Gillier is so right. Kids don't come to school if they don't have clean clothes, believe it or not, and that impacts attendance. So we have a laundry center that was established in partnership with our local businesses so that parents can wash the clothes for free. And the other thing is, if we want our kids to look at options, whether it be going into the workforce, whether it be going into the military or technical college or a four-year college, you got to be able to provide mentoring and guidance. So making sure that we have teachers as advisors that are putting in front of our kids the opportunities that are available to them and what's required depending on what they aspire to do once they graduate from high school. And if that means that we need to help you fill out a college application or a job application or help you create a resume, then that's what we're going to do. That's what equity is all about. I know my child will have the support and he wouldn't have to worry about anything, but there are children that don't have the support and the parents don't even know where to begin. So that's an issue of equity when you don't even know how to tackle a college application or how to access financial aid. And so we take that total child and we make sure that we have the wraparound services needed for that student to be ultimately a contributing, productive member of society. And that's our goal. We want them to be successful in life. And that means we have to meet the social emotional needs that they have.
Dr. Price, I'd like to carry that response forward into this last question for the panel. And it's when you think ahead, once we're clear of the pandemic and you're able to identify what success actually looks like on the other side of this, what would you like to see as a marker of success in your district?
Well, first of all, our focus is we want our students to be successful in life, and I'm going to drive that home. And I don't want poverty to define your future and where you're going. And so I would like, when this is all over, for Baldwin County to be a model of why a high poverty majority minority school district can do when a community comes together and rallies around their public schools and wraps their arms around the children of this community. That we are going to have students that are either going to go into the workforce, into the military, 2-year college and 4-year college, and are going to contribute to the economic development of this community. That's what I hope will come out of all of this, in that what we've been able to do as a community to come together these last few months, that continues, and that we're able to put aside our differences and focus on what's best for our children, who are our future.
I think you're on your way. Dr. Gilliard, what about you? What would success look like once we're out of the woods on the pandemic?
I think success for Grady County is going to be that we have our third graders reading on grade level as a marker, and then when we get on into the high school level, that we partnered with our community and we know what jobs are available, and we prepared our students that are graduating for those jobs, and they graduate high school with a job or plans for post-secondary education. Right now we have students that are graduating and there are not jobs available in the community. So hopefully in those 3 to 5 years we'll be able to have partnered with the community, and those students that are staying with us have jobs.
Dr. Reagan Martin, last word.
Okay, well, I agree with Dr. Price and Dr. Gilliard. We want our students to be successful. We want them to have the tools that they need, whether it's devices, internet, skills, knowledge, whatever it is that they need, so that they can go out and be successful and productive citizens. We also want to help them to reach their hopes and dreams. So we talk a lot about that, and we want to know what the hopes and dreams are of our students, our parents, and our community, and we want to do everything possible to help them achieve them. So that would be our marker for success.
Well, I think you all understand why I said we had a rock star panel this afternoon. Dr. Reagan Martin, Dr. Gilliard, Dr. Price, I want to thank you for being with us, and I'm looking forward to seeing the success on the other side. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeff Ledford, Chief Advocacy Officer of the Georgia Association of Realtors.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? This is kind of exciting. Last year we were here and everybody was in the room, and now we're reaching probably the widest audience that we could have imagined. Probably wouldn't have imagined it last year, but pretty cool. So it's brought a lot of new challenges. Obviously I think that's been referenced a few times. Sorry about that. My glasses are fogging up with my mask. I forgot I had that on. The Georgia Realtors, for 100 years we've been around now. We turn 100 this year. We've always invested in our communities in the state. The way realtors look at it, the biggest investment in most individuals' lives are their homes. And if most Georgians are investing in their homes, and that's where their investment is, then we need to be investing in Georgia. And that's what we do. This year, one of the things that we did when the pandemic first started was look to see what can we be doing to help. And I'm really proud of our 51 boards around the state. We came up with some funding, administered a grant to them out of the funds that we normally support candidates with, and we were able to get to them $75,000 to go into local communities. They did things like buying gift cards from local businesses to then turn around and give them to people working in the hospitals and first responders. In other areas, they supplied lunches to kids that weren't getting them at school. So a lot of really, really neat things that were going on, and it all had to do with the local realtors understanding that need in that community to make it better and keep it going. Why are we involved with economic development? Why are we involved with the Chamber? Because much like the Chamber, we're comprised of a bunch of small businesses, about 43,000 of them. Every member of ours is in and of themselves a small business, and most of them in their brokerages are definitely small businesses as well. We're around the whole state. We're in every community. We're invested in every community. And also, much like the Chamber, we sell Georgia. Not just the idea of Georgia, we literally sell Georgia, parcel by parcel. There's, the one thing that can't be exported is land, and that's what we sell. But we're proud to be here, and proud to be sponsoring. And this next panel is going to be pretty exciting. We think it's going to be a fantastic one because it's on the future of rural housing. So I'd like to introduce Shantaria Charleston. She is the Training and Technical Assistance Director with Housing Assistance Council. Bill Gross, he's the owner and president of W.H. Gross Construction Company. And Lauren Miner, she's the president of the Bainbridge Decatur County Chamber of Commerce. And also proud to say we got our economic policy manager, Margaret Lacey, will be the moderator. So I'm looking forward to see what all comes up with this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of 42,000 of Georgia's realtors, I'm honored to moderate the panel today on the future of rural housing and how public-private partnerships and community action groups are making a difference in rural communities across the state. Realtors prescribe to a higher code of ethics and are committed to promoting homeownership for all and committed to the prosperity that comes with it. Homeownership is one of the greatest wealth builders for American families. The Georgia Realtors work to reduce the unnecessary regulations on home building to allow for more affordable houses to be built, increase education on the need for workforce housing, and to promote the investment that is our homes. I'm excited to further explore this topic with Terry, Lauren, and Bill. Right, Terry, will you tell us a little bit about how the Housing Assistance Councils work here in Georgia?
Sure. Can you hear me, Margaret?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. I do appreciate the opportunity to be part of the agenda today and to talk about the work of the Housing Assistance Council and, more importantly, the work of creating affordable housing opportunities across rural communities here in Georgia. And so before providing examples of how the Housing Assistance Council is working with groups in Georgia, I thought it would be useful to provide some context about the Housing Assistance Council, or HAC as we like to refer to ourselves, in terms of who we are, why we do what we do, and then how we do what we do. And so realizing that some of you in the audience might be a little bit familiar with the Housing Assistance Council, I promise to be brief. And so the Housing Assistance Council is a national nonprofit TA intermediary and community development financial institution with a mission to improve housing conditions for the rural poor, with an emphasis on the poorest of the poor in the most rural places. And so to achieve our mission, HAC utilizes a four-pronged approach. First, by providing access to upfront low-cost capital that many small rural nonprofits face challenges accessing. Secondly, is by providing specialized training and direct technical assistance aimed at building both organizational and development capacity of nonprofit organizations. Third is through extensive information provided through research and information on housing and policy data that informs sound housing decisions. And lastly, through policy interpretations supported by data that informs, influences, and promotes a strong, effective, and supportive government role in rural housing affordability. And so through these combined approaches, HAC seeks to impact three key outcomes. First is improved quality of life for rural residents. Second is shared prosperity. And third is thriving communities built around healthy, sustainable systems. And so our activities might range from something as simple as improving a single-family housing residence to influencing the way a community plans an entire region or place. And so really trying to ensure that the work that we do improves the quality of life for rural residents. And so, Margaret, to the point of how HAC interacts with groups in Georgia, we interact in a few ways. Our most current work with Georgia Group is probably under our Affordable Housing for Rural Veterans initiative, where we provide grant funds to do rehabilitation and modification on veteran-owned and occupied units. We also work through our lending arm. We have a pending loan out to a separate group group that is working on a 24-unit new construction development in Cordell, Georgia. In that instance, we're also providing limited amounts of technical assistance to identify financial gap resources, but largely the work with that group is through HAC's lending arm. So thinking of how we engage, our engagements happen in a variety of ways, and it really is largely depending upon the need of the organization.
Wonderful. All right, Lauren, next for you. The National Association of Realtors defines workforce housing as housing that is affordable to workers and close to their jobs. I understand that Decatur County has made the development of workforce housing a priority. Can you tell us why, and also about the work your community has done to encourage such development? How did your community begin this effort, and where do things stand?
Thank you, Margaret. We understand that workforce housing directly affects economic development in Bainbridge and Decatur County. And so if you know anything about Bainbridge, we've recently opened Taurus Manufacturing. They're a gun manufacturer. And we also have two other companies set to open in the summer of 2021. And so Taurus still has about 100 jobs to fill, and our other two companies together are about 300. So we understand that we need to be able to attract a qualified workforce, but we also need them to be able to relocate in Bainbridge. We pull a great deal of our workforce from Tallahassee, Dothan, and Thomasville, who surround us. So we definitely want them to be able to relocate to Bainbridge, but as of right now we have a great shortage as far as workforce housing goes. And when we say a shortage for workforce housing, we're not talking about housing just for your floor workers. We're talking about your middle management and even company head management. So we have a great need for single family housing, but also for rentals, so rental homes, but also apartments. We know that simply because our realtors have told us since the Taurus employees have moved here. Every apartment that has been built in the last 2 years has been filled before it was even done. And so we have a substantial need in this area. We reached out to several other communities to see how they developed housing, and most of them spoke on something like hiring a consultant, having them come do a housing study. And honestly, we knew where we were with housing. So we decided to take a different approach and skip that step. So myself and Rick McCaskill, who's our Economic Development Authority Director, met with local builders. And so here's our process and where we're at with it. We met with local builders, and it's very ironic that they're also two realty brokers, so it works really well there. And they met with us, and so what we wanted to know was, what are the obstacles? We educated them on the issue, which they already knew because they were realtors in our community. But we said, what are the obstacles to building homes? We understand that we don't need just one or two. We need whole neighborhoods. And so we met with them and learned, first and foremost, because of COVID and layoffs and delays in products, the price of building supplies is about 70% higher than what it was before. The last number I heard, the average house is $16,000 higher than it was pre-COVID. And so at this point in time, and I'm sure Bill can speak to this and you can clarify my numbers as well, they didn't see any reason to start right away simply because they knew that the margin was very small on new builds. The other big obstacle for them would be financing. And so we've worked with them to come up with a plan to meet with our local lenders, and so meeting with local banks and offering some kind of bulk financing. And so we're in the middle of that process right now. Lastly, other incentives that we could do to help them build. Our development authority has offered to cover the carrying charges for any of the land until the house sells for anyone that's willing to build 4 or more houses. And we also know that our city and county want this bad enough and understand the need that they're willing to provide incentives as well, and that's things like waiving tap fees and those types of incentives that they can provide. And so right now with COVID in our country and the climate like it is, we haven't yet approached our lenders, but that will be our next step. And hopefully we'll have homes starting to be built by next summer, or at least that's our timeline.
Fantastic. Bill, would you like to comment on that as well?
Lauren did a great job. Okay? You know, just so I work with a number of communities in and around Georgia, and whenever I'm asked to come in, I kind of have an opening story that I tell them, and I say, you know, building affordable housing or even market rate housing, you really need the whole town in on it, kind of like the Truman Show, where everybody's in on it. And what you want to do, and Lauren did a great job of talking about her process, is you want to enlist key people within the community, the bankers, the realtors, the churches, the government officials and all, and you're taking inventory of what you've got. You're looking at where your weaknesses are because you got visitors fixing to come to town. You want to clean those up so that you're presentable. And I think that rural Georgia is in a phenomenal spot right now. You got metro areas, people wanting to leave metro areas, people working from home, and being able to work in a rural community, it feels safer. It feels the quality of life is better. It's a simpler way of life, and a lot of people are looking at it. So it's a huge opportunity, I think, for rural communities to capitalize on that. One thing that I do in working with communities, and I'm going to highlight one that I've worked with here in years past, but it's in Brunswick. And one of the things that Brunswick did to promote their assets and they try to bring workforce housing is they took an inventory. They took the comprehensive plan and they double-clicked on it. And they said, you know, housing, let's focus on the housing part of it. And so they took a housing inventory and they identified about a dozen sites, you know, 9 or 10 sites in Brunswick, and they said, there's something that we need to happen. It's an old school, it's a vacant piece of property, it's a blighted area, and they enlisted the community and they said, ding ding, we've got to do something with these sites. And so one by one, they've created RFPs, and so they put it out for developers to bring ideas of what can you do on this site. If it's affordable housing, is it mixed use, but what can you do to change? And I'm proud to be part of two of the RFPs, and we responded, and it's a real compliment whenever you can take something in a depressed area of town, turn it around, and the whole neighborhood benefits from it. So it's truly a private-public partnership, but you know, economic development, I think everybody would agree, is a team sport. And it takes, if you can enlist the community and get the positive energy and use that constructively, then developers will seek you out, and builders. I mean, the place to start is with the homegrown guys. And when folks go to the diner to eat dinner, and they say, well, and ask the waitress, well, what's there to do in this town? He or she needs to be able to go, let me tell you, there's some really good stuff. Not, we don't have anything. You know, so that's kind of a quick and dirty of what the developers look for. First of all, they want to go to a town that's prepared. They want a gatekeeper that can help them get the questions answered. What kind of zoning issues do we have? Water and sewer tap fees? What's the land availability? With the rising cost of materials, as Lauren pointed out, and they are rising, hopefully they'll come back down, but a lot of infill sites that are already in towns may be the best option for a land cost. It may be less expensive to do an infill, let the city and the public work together, get a theme, recreate some some areas that have deteriorated, and really work with CDBG, get some funds, and make a dynamic outcome for their community.
Fantastic. Terry, how might a community engage the Housing Assistance Council as they seek to address rural housing concerns?
Sure, great. Connecting with the Housing Assistance Council is super easy. You can visit our website, www.ruralhome.org, to connect with our lending team or to obtain additional detailed information on our programs or activities. We also maintain and provide open access to our Rural Data Central that provides updated information in quick snapshots on housing conditions across the country, as well as our Veterans Data Central that many groups use to produce housing and statistical fact sheets for funders or other like governmental agencies and stakeholders that illustrate the need or scope of a housing issue in their communities. But probably more critical to nonprofit groups or housing development groups, if they are in need of technical assistance and or training, they can again connect with us through our website. We do have a sort of like a request TA button on our website, but then more specifically, they can request assistance through their local HUD office for technical assistance, which then gets routed to HAC or another like intermediary agency. And so to do that, groups would simply visit hudexchange.info, where they would then, I think it's program support, and then request in-depth assistance. And from there, you'll be provided with the sequential steps to making the formal request, which is free to the nonprofits or other associated small units of local government when they go that route. But if small units of local government are looking for assistance with how to correctly or effectively implement their programs of housing development assistance, they can simply go through their local HUD field office contact to start that process. And then again, all of that stuff gets routed directly to or the Housing Assistance Council or a like intermediary agency.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to ask both of you this question, actually. Some communities have a distinct gap in their housing stock, plenty of high and mid-end properties, but they're completely missing the workforce priced options. How can a community overcome this challenge? Obviously, you're working through this right now, but.
That's right, and I would say in Bainbridge we're probably a little different as far as high to mid. We really need everything from workforce housing and above. We really don't have a great inventory of homes at this moment. Any new home that's built right now is immediately consumed by the population that's already there in Bainbridge. And so the want for people who are already there to upgrade their homes into a newer or possibly something that better fits their family is a great need. And so that's definitely what we're trying to do, single forward, but also a big push for apartment and rental as well.
A tough question, but you know, as we touched on earlier, whether it's affordable housing that uses state and federal tax credits, or if it's just trying to use other programs, or if it's just building efficient homes, I think having a collective group within a community, the realtor group, the banking group, community leaders, giving the builders in the area, you may not have a developer come in and build a 200 lot subdivision, but you may have 5 builders that come in and build 10 houses apiece. Or there may be individual corporate citizens who see a need and want an investment or a return on some land that they've already got. So depending on the size of the community, there's going to be different strategies that you would employ. But the web presence that I think that the web presence for communities now to present themselves, not only to the rest of Georgia, but people that are moving out of metro places, is going to be great. And when you get the demand, I think the supply can come. But when you get people knocking on the door, and it depends on I know that we want more than just housing. We want industry. We want commercial businesses. So it's a holistic approach. but I don't know there's any one strategy other than, if I said the biggest is a community being like-minded so that they can have accurate data, like how many houses do you need, what price ranges are those, are the jobs and the people here to support it, so that investors, whether it's developers or their bankers, can feel comfortable with the decision to come and invest in the community.
And Margaret, I don't think I actually answered your question. I'm sorry. I would say the best thing to do, like Bill mentioned earlier, is get all the players at the table, everyone in your community at the table, and not ask yourself what we could do if we had the right pieces in place, but have a how mentality. And so, how do we make this work? Our city officials have already told us if there needs the infrastructure put in, if we need to locate on this property and they need a through a road, we can do that. And so we have everyone on board. Everyone understands the need, and they're willing to do what they can. And so it's really a let's think out of the box process.
Terry, do you have any comments on that question?
I actually do. As Bill was talking, there were so many things that were clicking in my mind. And so there are many things that go into creating community, as Bill sort of inferred to housing development. It's no simple feat, and of course it doesn't happen in a silo. And so just reiterating that partnerships become critical. The government agencies, economic development agencies, schools, foundations, philanthropies, and any other interested stakeholder that you can get to the table. And so working with local development authorities and also participating in your local consolidated planning process, that is where the decisions are made around where the federal funding goes, whether it be new construction, rental, or wherever it's going to go within the community. And then also hitting on the data point again, also knowing and being able to clearly articulate your community's need. Funders like to make data-informed decisions, so having the numbers and the data to support the need is really essential.
Bill, we know that you've done an incredible amount. You have an incredible amount of experience developing housing across the spectrum. What are the metrics that a developer might look at for a rural community before deciding to do a project there?
Well, demand. A developer, a builder wants to know, can he or she come in and mitigate their risk? Okay, that means what's the market, and is it a healthy market? And is there job creation there? Is it a community that's progressing, or is it one that's deteriorating? And so, you know, if a rural community has got a little deterioration going on, then they need to take a look at themselves and say, maybe we need to clean up a little bit. And how can we start presenting ourselves to be a progressive, meaning a growing community and not a shrinking community. It's easy to become complacent, and some of the developments that I do, the DCA points out what's called undesirables. Okay, and you drive by them every day, but you don't notice them until somebody goes, "That's an undesirable." Many of our rural communities have that, and unfortunately, that can affect the way that other people look at the community. So what do I look at it? First of all, it's great to have people with energy in a community that love their community, that want to make a difference in their community. And it makes it very inviting for builders and developers to want to bed in with them. Nobody likes to come to places they're not wanted. So I don't think there's any magic to it, but people deal with people that they like. And if builders feel comfortable coming into a community and feel like they're getting supported, then there's a higher probability of them wanting to come and put money at risk.
So piggybacking off of that, as a developer, what approaches have you seen to be most effective to get a community to encourage someone to come into their area?
Well, I tell you, one thing that I think almost every community could do in the state of Georgia, small or large, is they could take a vacant site that may be a blighted site, and they can say they can put a little think tank on it and go, what can we do with this site? And they can create in partnership with the individual, or if the school board owns it, or if the city owns it, and they can put an RFP out one thing that RFP does is it goes out to surrounding areas, and it puts a beacon to the development world that, hey, ding, 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 my town wants to do something. And we're open for business, and we want to bring you there. And while it may not land a developer every time, but it can start bringing interest to your community. And that's the way that I learn about developments. Some cities do urban redevelopment corridors, or the DCA, you know, there's programs to where they can help with Main Street programs. And folks that are in the development world that look and pay attention to these initiatives, they see communities that are trying to improve themselves, and that makes an inviting atmosphere for developers and contractors want to come to.
Before we wrap up, from a fiscal perspective, the ad valorem taxes paid on most homes typically do not cover the cost of services delivered by a community. Thinking about school systems, roads, recreation departments, public safety, how does the community prepare for growth while considering these fixed costs?
That's a great question. Bill, do you have any experience with that?
Well, I do a little bit, but you know, I think every economic development, or better yet, every city or county official is going to say, hey, we need a balanced tax digest. And I think one thread that has been through every talk that I've heard today is that we're kind of in new territory with this pandemic. And so things that were norms are not norms anymore. We have the new norm. And one of those things is going to be folks working from home, probably fewer retail outlets and fewer office buildings, and also we have to figure out, as each community is going to be different, how we can adjust, okay? And so I don't know what that looks like, other than we all need to be in on it. Every community needs to work together, identify their strengths, identify their weaknesses, and work on them. And part of that is trying to have a balanced digest. We all want the big industry to come to town that has a lot of high-paying jobs, that we don't have to give everything away. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen anywhere. So we have to just get our comprehensive plan out, dust it off, work on it, figure out how we can make it better, try to enlist as many people. Everybody in the town needs to be a cheerleader. And have a common vision and a common goal, and understand that it's going to take a while to work on it. I'm not evading the question, but that's, you know.
Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll focus on the nonprofits role, because that's kind of the real focus for the Housing Assistance Council. And so the one thing that we are encouraging groups to do as they start thinking around community and planning for development and growth and expansion is to really take a holistic approach in doing, or what we like to call, placemaking. And placemaking is where you look at creating a community more than just the housing development, as Bill hinted at, bringing in the industry that will bring in the additional tax base. And so one of a few of the key partners that we've seen so far in the beginning stages of the work that we've done around placemaking and encouraging groups to sort of think in those terms is that really critical that education, youth, and those other institutions, colleges get a seat at the table in terms of thinking through those decisions. Lots of creative ideas are coming out of higher education and youth these days. And so really thinking about the whole of a community, more so than just the housing development piece.
Fantastic. All right, it seems like the theme is, working together, our communities working together to increase the housing stock in our communities. So I'm going to allow each of you to have a few minutes, few seconds to wrap up.
I would just like to comment on something that Bill mentioned earlier, and that was making your community attractive, especially through your online presence. And so something that we have become aware of is the amount of information that's online about our community, whether it's accurate and whether it's positive. And so the Chamber of Commerce has taken a role where we're doing an online presence campaign and taking an inventory of everywhere that Bainbridge shows up, every social media site, every news station, and really trying to understand how we can produce content for the next generation that may be moving here and taking these jobs, how they want to consume that information, and making it easy for them to consume. And so we believe that that helps economic development. It helps recruit industry and also workforce. And obviously, from what you were saying, it's something that builders find attractive as well. And so that's something else that we're doing to further this initiative.
Just to sum it up, you know, we talked about the collective thinking and the inventorying of your properties, and trying to have as positive as you can. And there's going to be things aside from housing that are going to benefit from this. Really, you know, part of the conversation I think in every community needs to be about how important it is for communities to try to keep their commerce within their communities. To the extent that they can, and you know, to be a pep talk or a cheerleader for just everything, for the quality. When people think about rural Georgia, I think that they think about that's a good quality of life, and if we can capitalize that and on that and spread it a little bit, then I think that a lot of good things can come out of it. Housing, bring people take risks that they wouldn't normally take, meaning invest in communities and take a little risk. So I don't have any magic dust, but I think that the mindset and the attitude that we have has a lot to do with it. Thank you.
Terry, do you have a few words?
I do. I love Bill's closing, that there's nothing magic about it. There's a saying that if you've been to one rural community, you've been to that one rural community. There's so many different aspects to rural, depending, and they vary from place to place. But what I would say, though, is that nonprofits and community development organizations that are in the communities, they really could benefit from focusing on, you know, establishing those key partnerships, making an effort or making certain that they have the data that informs and helps promote the needs in their community. Also thinking around innovation. We know that broadband and e-connectivity in rural places have been a challenge, and so as they go through or as they approach planning for the future, thinking about and incorporating that innovative piece and that broadband and e-connectivity into it. And then also too, as I mentioned very briefly a few moments ago, thinking about whole systems as they look at community development and creating that place of community, and not just focusing on the housing, because you need the jobs, you need the education, you need the schools, all that kind of stuff really goes into it. And so that would be my advice.
Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful discussion on rural housing. Thank you, Terry, Bill, and Lauren.
Our next panel discussion will tackle a topic that affects all our communities, whether we realize it or not. For several years now, the Georgia Chamber has led discussions around the state regarding race relations and cultural equality. Considering the national dialogue taking place, we believe it is fitting to bring these tools to our rural community leaders to help facilitate meaningful conversations which offer the promise of a more equitable future for all of Georgians. Today's panel features Albany State University's president, Marion Frederick, the president of the Latin American Association, Mr. Santiago Marquez, and Mr. Terrence Johnson, who works with the J.W. Fanning Institute of Leadership at the University of Georgia. Our panel will be moderated by the Chief Experience Officer of the Georgia Chamber, Mr. Morgan Law. Please welcome these panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for being here with us today. It's exciting to be back in Tifton and have this program underway. My name is Morgan Law, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Experience Officer for the Georgia Chamber. And 4 years ago, when we started envisioning the concept that would ultimately become the Rural Prosperity Summit, one of the key components or the goals of the program was that we wanted each of our sessions to provide our audience with tools and resources and insight that they could take back to their community to address a challenge or a big, hairy problem, as some people like to call them. In looking at that, that really has been kind of our goal throughout all of these sessions. And in considering the national dialogue, as Adam just addressed, we believe that the time is right for us to have a conversation around racial equality, race relations, and how that can affect our rural communities. This is not something that is isolated to our metropolitan areas, either in the state of Georgia or around the country. These are conversations that really, quite frankly, should be happening in all of our communities. And so we decided, and with our leadership through Chris and our executive committee and the Rural Prosperity Council, to bring this program to you in this panel this afternoon. So what we'll do is we have three distinguished guests that are with us, and we will actually, we're going to ask each of you 3 questions. And these 3 questions, we hope that they will provide insight and perspective for our audience members to understand the concepts of what we need to discuss, how to do it, and perhaps the why around it. Granted, we have 30 minutes, so we're going to do the best that we can. But what I'd like to do is take just a moment and introduce our panel, and then we'll get started. As Adam said, first, we're delighted to have President Marion Frederick with Albany State University. She is the 10th, I want to get this right, she is the 10th president of this HBCU in Albany, the best HBCU. We saw the ad this morning. Enjoyed your commercial. It was awesome. She's been with the university since 2018 after a career of more than 30 years of public service. She is a double dog. She has 2 degrees from the University of Georgia, so go dogs. We're always pleased to see that. So thank you very much for being here. Mr. Terrence Johnson, also on stage with us, is a public service leader at the University of Georgia and the J.W. Fanning Institute for Leadership Development. Terrence is from California, has made his way through Loyola University, the University of Missouri, and has been here in Georgia for a number of years, and really has a terrific role there at Fanning, where he is able to work with communities and organizations around the state and help them understand how to have difficult and challenging conversations. And then finally, my good friend Santiago Marquez, who is on screen with us. We're delighted to have Santiago with us. He is the president of the Latin American Association, a role that he took 6 months ago or so. Previously, he was the president and CEO of the Georgia Hispanic Chamber, which is an alliance partner of ours at the Georgia Chamber. So we're excited to have him. He is due congratulations, as he just picked up his MBA about 2 weeks ago from Notre Dame. So again, thank you all for being here, and with that, we will get started. We're going to ask each of our panelists 3 questions and give you each about 3 minutes to work through these responses, and again, hope that they will lead you to some insight. So with that, President Frederick, we'll start with you, if we may. What has shaped your experiences with respect to race relations here in Georgia or nationally? What gives you cause for concern, and what gives you cause for hope?
All right. Let me say, I was born in North Philadelphia, and I grew up there, and I always say I grew up in North Philly and was raised in Georgia. And so I've seen a lot. So although I've been in the workforce for very long, I still claim I'm just 25. But have been around a lot. And, I think my framing has come from different events that have happened and that I've seen in my life. My parents were very active in civil rights. They were even in Philadelphia. We had to fight for so many things to get done in our neighborhood. I grew up seeing that. Going to the University of Georgia, it brings you a whole different level of respect for what's fair, what's not fair, what do you need to get involved in, what you don't get involved in. I think all the things that are going on in the world right now, it's not new. It's just at a different level, a different intensity. It is making us stop, look, and listen. And I think that's phenomenal. I think the fact that our younger generation right now feels the need to be heard in a way that we have to respect, whether or not you like it. You have to respect the fact that they're out there doing what they're doing, and we will see that morph into probably something different. But the message that they're trying to get across: don't take advantage. Treat me, as the human that I am. Stop making me fight for my rights. Those should be, given. And I think that is what now is reframed my thinking about race and relations. We haven't gotten it right. You mentioned earlier that the chamber has started conversations and have been in conversations for years around race and relations and how it impacts us. And we still don't have it right yet. And so you got to ask the question, what's going on? What's stopping us from doing the things that we know we need to do? And so I think that is really what's starting to frame and give me a different framing for where we are. And unfortunately, if we don't change how we're doing things, we'll still be here 5, 10 years from now asking the same questions.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that perspective. And Terrence, I want to ask you the same question. I know you grew up in California, in Compton, if I understand correctly.
Actually, South Central Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yes.
And you really bring a different perspective. So I'll ask the question again. What has shaped your perspective on race, the relations, and what gives you hope, and what gives you cause for concern?
So I'll tell you, I was actually born in St. Louis and moved to Georgia when I was a youngster. And it was in the early 1970s, right before we moved to South Central Los Angeles. And I can tell you that Smyrna, Georgia in the early 70s was more than a notion for me. I was the only black male in my elementary. And what I was faced with then, and it just stands out, I can remember it like it was yesterday, kids running up, touching my hair. I did have hair then, a fro actually, and kids, rubbing my skin to see if it came off. And during that time, I was very fast, and I used to like to fight. So it was a good combination. So I could catch the kids that did it, and I got into fights and things of that sort, which kept me in trouble. And we eventually moved to South Central Los Angeles after only about 6 months in Smyrna. And I can tell you, I think that's where my mother's balance around race and around how to treat people came in, because I got a lot of unfortunate things happen to me at the other end of the police force in Los Angeles. I lost the count of the amount of times I've been handcuffed and thrown up the side of police cars and guns pointed at me, the whole 9 yards. And never once have I committed a crime. And so all that shaped my just opinions towards race, but it didn't galvanize me towards hating anyone. And I have to blame that on my mother. And then, in Georgia, I'll tell you, I recall the first time I ever saw this as a young kid. There was a store in Smyrna, Georgia. This guy, he's probably not with us anymore because he was really old then, but he used to give candy on credit. So he was like better than Santa Claus, and he was a white male, right? So it wasn't all negative as far as my impressions. I had good impressions as well, but there was a couple of instances where it really just stuck out really bad. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. Santiago, my friend, I didn't share this in your introduction, but I know you moved here with your parents in 1971 from Cuba and have really made a life for yourself here and become quite the success. And so I'd love to hear your perspective. What in your upbringing in this country, what shaped your perspective, and what, again, gives you hope and what gives you pause?
Well, thank you, Morgan, and it's a pleasure to be with you guys. Sorry I can't be there in person. Definitely, when we came from Cuba, we moved to Portland, Oregon in '71. I was a year old, and there weren't many Cubans in Portland, Oregon at the time. There was probably a group of about 12 families. And we all knew each other. We all went to the grocery store together. We all went to church together. And we all actually created a little community. But I really didn't think about racism. I didn't see it until I was about 12 years old. And I saw the KKK marching up to a grocery store, Fred Meyer, up to the up to the top level when I was 12. And then my friend said, "Oh, this happens." I was at a sleepover. He says, this happens every Saturday night here. And that was a shock. I had no idea what was going on. And then during that year, we moved to Georgia, to Atlanta, Georgia. And with the history here in Atlanta in '82 and Georgia in the South is when I really started digging in and learning a lot about the Civil War, about everything that had happened. I was only 12 or 13 years old. And I remember going to Stone Mountain and thinking to myself, what's all this Confederate stuff? Like, what does it mean? And why are we celebrating it? And I spent a lot of years trying to analyze that and understanding that it was a different culture than I was used to. But I think my upbringing, being a foreigner, looking like I'm mixed race, having a lot of races in my family, being married to a white woman, having 2 daughters that proclaim themselves to be Latinas. I just have always grown up in this kind of melting pot and never really thought much about, you're black, you're white, you're different. Because for me, I've always been in these environments where everything is mixed. Even if I was the only Latino in the classroom, or which happens a lot, or the only Latino in the room, my whole experience, my whole upbringing has always been more of a global perspective, I think, than in the United States. What I've picked up on, it was always black and white. And that's what diversity meant for many years. My mindset is more of a global perspective where you have all these different cultures blending in together. So what gives me hope is the millennials and the kids that are, my kids' age. Forget tolerance. They will not tolerate racism. They will not tolerate hatred. They don't think of the world that way, right? And I've seen it get better with each generation. That's where the hope lies for me. What gives me pause is that we're still here. We're still struggling with this. Racism is the thing that the United States has to get over. It's the thing that's holding us back. And we're still struggling with it, right? And so we've got to find a way to get through this and eradicate it out of our systems.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it was important for us when we put this together to have a multicultural panel to share those different perspectives, because it is, again, this country is made up, and that's what makes it such a wonderful place. But again, we all need to have that opportunity for equality and respect and treat each other from a genuine perspective, which is what one of the speakers earlier today shared, and it really touched home. Okay, the next question I'm going to ask is a little different. We've talked about it among ourselves, but for each of you, President Federick, we'll start with you again. You're on your way. You're driving back to Albany after you leave here in Tifton, and a miracle has occurred. And race relations are immediately restored to the way they should be. It is a vision that you in your mind see. It is the way it should be. When you get out of your car at home, what is different? How do you know it's different? And how does that affect you personally at the house, in your life? And how does it affect you professionally?
We did talk about it, and I still don't have an answer. So here's the deal. A miracle with race relations. So first, let me just say, it doesn't take a miracle. I think that's where I get stuck. It doesn't take a miracle. It just takes us deciding that we don't want to do the things that we've done before, that we don't want to behave or engage or exclude the way that we've been before. So it doesn't reach my miracle bar because it's frankly just too freaking simple to do it right. I think, a difference would be that, on this stage, maybe right next to me, there would be a white gentleman or female where you can ask the same question, right? I mean, that's kind of that's where the difference would be. It would be, maybe after 5 when we're going to dinner, it's not just with the friends who look like me, but it's all friends, right? It's not my black, white, or Latino friends. It's all friends. And I know that is a leap for probably all of us if we really are honest. Maybe you have your faith-based days. Mine is Sunday. A lot of the people, 99.99% of the people in my church look just like me. And I don't have a problem with that, but I don't want to be uncomfortable if someone who is there that doesn't look like me. I think having conversations and being okay with being different. Being okay, I mean, my background I happen to love. I don't want to change it. I don't want to be somebody else. I don't want my experiences wiped away and replaced with someone else's. I think if we all, could get out of that same car and be so comfortable with what is around us and who we are, not see each other as an obstacle or a threat, not, think, well, for me, I'm a college president, and I still am concerned when I walk in stores that I'm going to be profiled in a store. And that is absolutely ridiculous, y'all. That is ridiculous. But it's a reality as well. Get that feeling to go away. I want that feeling, and a lot of that is internal. And I think the miracle for me would be that we are willing and we accept the fact that it is all internal and it doesn't take a miracle, and we should do our part, and we should question ourselves whenever we are treating someone the way that we would not treat someone else. And it doesn't take a lot. It does take courage, though. And I think that's something that we are short on right now, particularly in America. We're short on the courage, and I think that's where the miracle would be for me.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I would submit that I do think we're starting to see people step forward in a courageous fashion, and especially like some of the young folks that we've talked about several times. They are picking up that baton and carrying it forward in a very courageous fashion. So that's fascinating, and I appreciate you sharing that. All right, Mr. Johnson. All right. For you, the miracle has occurred. You make it back to Gwinnett County in your backyard. When we did our briefing call, y'all, he's sitting in the backyard. President Federer's in her office. I'm in my office. He's on his backyard with the chaise lounge, batting off the bugs.
That's it.
But you get back to the house. This miracle has occurred. What is different? What do you see and what do you experience?
So I thought about this question a lot. I think there would be a reduction or an elimination of hate. I think I would go onto social media and I would see so many hateful things. I turn on the television, wouldn't hear or see so many hateful things. I think of hate in the same terms of, as I think about the grave and I think about fire. Both are never satisfied. Hate is also never satisfied. It never gets full. And so it just seems to just eat up everything that's around it. And hate on sight, is what I thought about when I got this question. I remember in 1982, this is well before helicopter moms. I was looking at the University of Missouri's dorms, and I picked out one. It was called Baker Park. I don't think it's there anymore. And I thought, that's got to be upscale. Baker Park, what a name. It was the most raggediest dorm on campus, right? So when I got there, and I remember walking into that dorm room, and there was a white male in there, and he was a good-sized kid. And I came in, I've always been a pretty cheerful human, and I was like, hey, how you doing, man? I'm Terrence, I'm from da-da-da-da-da. And he didn't say anything. And so I tried to strike up a conversation with him. He says, listen, he says, this is my side of the room, this is your side of the room. Let's draw a line right down the middle, and we won't have any problems this year. And I said, that's fine with me because the door and the telephone are on my side. So just to, my miracle would be that on-site hate would not be there, because although I've developed coping mechanisms to deal with stuff like that, it hurts and pains me. And like Dr. Frederick said, to this day, I don't pass a police officer without getting a feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I don't rest until my son is home from his job, so I get that. So.
And I think that was something, and Santiago, I'm coming to you, but something Terrence said just made me reflect on. We had a session in our office where we had a very frank, open conversation with our entire team about race and how that works in the workplace and how we can do better. And I remember learning, and I listened. I listened intently to what was being shared, and was really the courage shown by a number of our coworkers at the office to step forward and share perspectives. But some of the things that I had never considered as a white male, hearing one of the mothers talk about worrying about her son coming home after a high school football game or going out with buddies, is not something that I had ever experienced, nor did I ever worry with my daughter. And so it was the opportunity to learn and to experience something and to have an open mind and open perspective, I think is really, really helpful in moving this conversation forward. So to my teammates, I appreciate you being brave and sharing that and sharing that with us at work. Santiago, all right, I'm gonna ask you the same question. I wanna get it right. So, well, you're already home. So you run an errand, you come back to the house, this miracle has occurred, and race relations are as you would have them. What do you see? What's different? How does the world look to you? What's your experience?
I think it's all about love, and I don't understand how we proclaim ourselves to be Christians and or people of faith. Many of us are, not all of us are, I understand that. But how we can take that cape off after Sunday services or Mass and then treat each other as less than humans. And I think that for those of us who believe, we have to have that notion that love one another. And if you do that, then you see others as people. You don't dehumanize people. You don't look through them. You don't look beyond them. And I've experienced that in my life before, right? Where I could tell that somebody was not looking at me. They were looking through me and they weren't addressing me. My wife is Caucasian and we would go somewhere and they would talk to her and they wouldn't talk to me. And so I think that if we really focus on treating people as people with dignity, then all of this goes away. But the ability that we have to dehumanize people and then go Sunday or whatever day it is you worship, pretend to be somebody who's a faith, a Christian or whatever, and then you walk out of there and you start treating people less than humans, blows my mind. So I don't think it's that difficult. I agree with the doctor. I think it's a very simple formula. Treat people with dignity, love, and respect.
Sounds like the golden rule for those of us that, in the Christian faith. So, all right, well, thank you for sharing that. And our final one is a bit more in the morsels of advice, suggestions to our audience. So again, President Frederick, we'll start with you. What is some of the best advice that you could share our participants this afternoon that you could share to help our audience understand how to initiate a conversation, potentially difficult conversation around race? What are those nuggets that they can take and really put into action tomorrow when they get back to the office or to the house tonight?
Starting to question myself. Santiago talked about love and you talked about hate, and I didn't say either one of those. But that is probably the core of it. One of the things I think we have got to do, having the conversation is really important. It's very important, but we have got to start acting. We have got to get to the point where we've decided we're going to do something and do it. And you know what? It may not be right the first time. It may not be right the second time. But we all, I think, already know how to have the conversation. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about how to start the conversation. We are all in business. We're in education. We're in those things. We know how to have a conversation. It goes back to the same thing. We got to have courage to have it. And when I say that, those people that have control, people who are making the difference on whether or not you're going to hire somebody or educate somebody or let somebody buy a house, those are the people that need to have courage to have the conversation. Or just, be willing to at least accept the fact that they don't want to, and they are okay with the world as it is. But I would say just have the courage to go out, sit down, forget the parameters around that conversation, just start talking. Because today, it is really easy to walk up to someone and say, hey, how are you? And I think that's where the conversations start, especially right now. How are you? And what do you think about? Pick anything, and that conversation starts. What is something you want to do? What do you want to see changed? You have a whole game plan before the end of the conversation. And I think if we just each went out and did that at least once, make it intentional, make it, something that you really want to do, and then do it. You got to do it. And I think that's where the change will come in place. Because we can keep talking. Again, I love to talk. But at the same time, we also have to act.
We have to take that. We have to take that step.
We have to take the step and be willing for it to be wrong the first time, and then go back and try it again.
That is definitely something that I've learned, is that I may make a mistake and that it's okay, but take the step forward.
Right.
and learn from it. So that's wonderful advice. Terrence, I know you've got all kinds of nuggets and tidbits in your briefcase. What are you going to share?
JW Fanning Institute is about to come out of me, but I'm trying to be cool because we got like 5 minutes left, right?
3 minutes for you.
Santiago, can I buy some time, brother?
On the golf course.
All right. So two things then. I think just going off what Dr. Frederick said, I mean, in addition to that, listening and acting, when you're in the midst of all that, know how to listen. Listen with your head and with your heart. Not only listening for the content of what's being said so you can get your rebuttal together, but listen to the feelings that's behind what that person is saying. When you listen with your head and heart, people can tell. I mean, because you're there with head nods, all the attendant behaviors, all that stuff. And then the second thing is knowing how to join resistance. I mean, there's a lot of resistance out there. There's a lot of opportunities to fight. As a matter of fact, while I'm talking, if somebody who feels strong today with a mask and if you can hit your hands with some sanitizer, work your way up here real fast. Come on. One person. Yeah, that was anybody. Yeah. All right, so sanitizer. I got some sanitizer too. Okay, y'all just watch, and I want you to do what feels natural, okay?
It's completely unscripted.
Thank you. Have a seat. There's no prizes. So, you all. So, what did you see? Just real quick. I got a minute with Santiago waiting. What did you see? Resistance. What did you see actually? You can't see. You saw two people doing what? I pushed and he did what?
Push back.
And as I dug my heels in more, he did what? Right. And so when I stopped pushing, he did what? All right. So the trick is, and this is the learning point in this, is when I stopped pushing, why didn't you continue to push? Okay, you didn't want us to fall down. You all, what we have to figure out as a society is how to put our hands down verbally, how to do that action that the doctor just talked about and engage in a way to where we're joining resistance versus getting in there and digging our heels in and making sure our point is understood. All right.
That is fabulous. Thank you for the demonstration, Chairman Reed. We appreciate your volunteering. Santiago, what morsels would you like to share with us?
The entire United States of America needs cultural competency training. We are a different country now than we were 40 years ago. We've had huge waves of immigration from Black and brown people, and there's been a huge influx of people that do not have the same beliefs that we do. And until we're able to, and we should start doing this in grade school and middle school and high school, I think we should do it throughout our educational system, and it should really be part of a professional development for employees. Until we do this, we're never really going to have a deep understanding of the culture that makes up the United States, in my opinion, because people are afraid to have the dialogue. They're afraid to be pointed out as being racist. They're afraid of losing their jobs, especially now with social media. So the minute somebody says something, you get it on video, you can take it totally out of context, it goes viral, that person's fired. So there has to be, it's not just black and white. We got to stop thinking in those terms. We got to bring this global perspective to the United States because it's here and we're competing with the world. And we need some kind of training, even as adults, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate all of you sharing that. And just so you know that there are resources that are available, whether it's the cultural training like Santiago is suggesting, programming through the Fanning Institute at the University of Georgia. I'm sure Albany State has all kinds of resources that are available. Again, the message that I'm hearing is be courageous, stop just talking about it, and have a conversation. Step forward, take that step, and understand that it is okay if you make a mistake, but if it is done out of a position of sincerity from your heart, that you really will be able to move that conversation forward. If you're interested in learning more about this conversation, I would encourage you to reach out to our panelists. Additionally, we are going to have in November 10th, 10th, I believe, is the Georgia Chamber's Diversity and Inclusion Summit, which will be our next major program. Would encourage you, if you want to learn more about that, take advantage of that program. You can learn more at gachamber.com/events. And I want to thank our panelists for being here. And before I do that, there was something, again, we're a little rusty on doing live programs, so Matt, I apologize for not putting this in your script. I would like to let everyone know that we have a tradition at the Rural Prosperity Summit to thank our speakers. We actually make a donation to an area charity instead of giving you a token tchotchke to take back to your desk. And so this year we were making a donation to the Southwest Georgia's Children's Alliance to help them provide happy holidays to foster care children in foster care. There are more than 600 that this organization reaches out across 17 different counties here in Southwest Georgia. So this will make sure that Santa does not miss any of these kiddos, and they'll have a Merry Christmas. So thank you again. Please thank our panelists this afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the U.S. Congressman of Georgia's 1st Congressional District, Mr. Buddy Carter.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to join you today. While I'm sorry I won't be able to be there in person, it's an honor to submit this video update of what's happening in Washington, D.C. There's been a lot going on in Washington, D.C. as we work to combat the coronavirus and help get the country back on track. Thus far, Congress has passed what amounts to 4 coronavirus relief packages, providing billions in critical funds to the economy, the American people, and to help fund the healthcare needs of the country and the development of a vaccine. Whether it's working to get important telehealth provisions included to ensure people can see their health providers, or working with Operation Warp Speed to accelerate the development and deployment of a vaccine, we've been working to get the country back on track. With all of the discussion around COVID-19 and the pandemic, it's important to note how the focus remains on our communities and our constituents. I'm reminded every time I go to Washington just how incredible our state and our fellow Georgians are, and how I was elected to serve them and do everything in my power to help them. I'd like to discuss for a bit the different areas of importance to rural prosperity and some of the actions I've taken to help build out those communities and the opportunities that they have. First, let's start with trade and what it means for Georgia. The passage of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement has created new opportunities for rural communities in South Georgia, especially for our agricultural producers. The Georgia and Florida delegations worked to secure commitments from the U.S. Trade Representative's office to act on concerns of unfair Mexican agricultural practices and shipments. As a result of USMCA hearings on fruit and vegetable provisions, the USTR's office announced the Section 201 Global Safeguard investigation into the harm Mexican imports have caused Georgia blueberry growers. They are now reviewing additional actions in other agriculture sectors in an effort to correct decades of unfair practices. This is the first of its kind in years and represents significant progress for growers in South Georgia. Next up is rural broadband and what it means for our rural communities. Rural broadband and high-speed internet are some of the most important tools we can provide to folks in rural communities like those in South Georgia. Access to high-speed internet opens up new businesses and job opportunities, allowing people to stay in their local communities if they want to make a living. It also opens up market access for small businesses to every corner of the globe. I've advocated for regulatory changes and critical funding to expand rural broadband across the country, including in South Georgia. Now, the focus is on getting the networks to cover as much area as possible using updated deployment maps we helped change in Congress. That helps parlay into the next topic, which is telehealth. As the pandemic hit earlier this year, we knew we would have a greater dependency on telehealth services. Rural health systems and hospitals have been closing their doors around the country, and telehealth is one way to ensure they can continue to operate for their local communities. We've dedicated funding in the COVID relief packages and changed the telehealth requirements so that rural communities can more easily see their doctors and other health professionals. Between expanding broadband and setting in place changes to telehealth requirements, rural Georgians will be able to receive the treatment they need. Infrastructure and what it means for transportation is another important aspect. Infrastructure has been an impediment to growth in rural communities, but we're working to change that. the expansion of the Port of Savannah, growth in Brunswick, changes to the interstate systems, and other changes will help bring new jobs and opportunities to rural communities. Around Savannah, we've seen a lot of the growth happening in communities outside of Savannah where there was room for growth and qualified workforces. A greater focus on roads, rails, and freight networks will ensure producers and businesses in rural Georgia can fully access our ports and other points to get their products to market. Changes to the NEPA regulatory process for infrastructure projects will speed up completion while protecting the environment in communities where they're being done. Federal funding also plays an important part in my advocacy for rural Georgia. One of the most important issues is helping to secure vital funding for the projects and priorities in our rural communities. Whether it's helping a community health center get funding for a treatment program or money going to an infrastructure project, these dollars help with economic prosperity in our communities. Continued advocacy and outreach to our office can help us in getting the message through to the appropriate federal agency. Every dollar we get here in South Georgia is important. The military also plays a key role in the prosperity of rural Georgia. Many of the military bases in the U.S., and especially here in Georgia, are located in rural areas because of size constraints, mission sets, and other purposes. I have continued to work with the Georgia delegation to emphasize how Georgia is the ideal location for the military to continue operations and grow. That includes bringing in new missions and expanding opportunities between installations and the communities that surround them. As a proud representative of 4 military installations, I know and appreciate just how integral they are to our communities. I will continue to fight for new opportunities and the important national defense role these installations and units have in Georgia. Next, we have agriculture, an issue important to so many rural communities in Georgia. As the state's largest industry, agriculture is integral to the livelihood of many families and towns. Those livelihoods can be threatened by events like natural disasters. That's why I advocated for relief funding for Georgia growers after multiple freezes struck during important seasons, pushing many into catastrophic positions. We were successful in getting millions in funding for Georgia farmers, allowing them to keep the lights on, the farms working to feed their fellow Americans. As I mentioned earlier, we've made progress in addressing some of the unfair trade actions that have left American growers at a significant disadvantage. We've also worked to ensure the labor pools necessary to harvest these crops are available at the right time. Unlike other industries, growers don't have the luxury of deciding when they want to harvest their crops. When they're ready, they're ready. That's why it's so important that they are able to get the right workers in at the right time. That's been a challenge for years, but we've made great strides in addressing those challenges. All of these actions I mentioned today have played a role in supporting rural prosperity. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to present this video, and I hope next year we can do this in person. God bless.
Please welcome Matt Reed back to the stage.
Thank you, Congressman Carter, for joining us virtually, and we look forward to hopefully having him back next year as well. With that brings us to a close of our 4th annual Rural Prosperity Summit. I sincerely hope that you found the program today, whether here in person or virtually, to be valuable. Our goal with this program each year is to provide you with meaningful information that you can take home to your community and hopefully make an impact on what you've heard. Thank you again to all of our sponsors for their support today. We simply could not accomplish this program without them and are humbled by their continuing engagement in this council. Our next Rural Prosperity Council meeting is scheduled for November 10th and will be available online. And we look forward to 2021, where we'll get back out in communities as we started earlier this year. If you're interested in learning more about how you can be a part of the Rural Prosperity Council, please contact Tiffany Holmes at tholmes@georgiachamber.com. We thank you all again for your participation today, and we look forward to seeing you all in person next year. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.